Mispriced players in the Dynasty marketplace, that and more this week on the Footballguys Dynasty Show. Jordan, who is your first mispriced player by that Dynasty marketplace that has trouble sometimes coming to a good value for some of these profiles?
Yeah, the big one for me is Javonte Williams. You look at Dynasty startups in the past month, he's going running back 3. As a median, you look at where he's going in underdog drafts or what would be best ball redraft drafts, it's running back 12. So you already opened up a huge difference there in terms of what that means. And when you look at we transfer over to our projections for a second, and all that goes into that. Javonte Williams was running back 17 last year, 203 carries, 918 yards, 8 touchdowns. He had 28 receptions and basically 213 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns, 12.2 points per game. That put him at running back 17 overall in the season. When you fast forward to this year, what we project for him is 208 carries. So that's only 5 more carries than last year. We project 22 more yards and the same number of touchdowns. You see basically a jump up to 44 receptions, 323 through the air, and about the same touchdowns. We project 2.9 compared to 2 last year. So really all that boils down to, if you just think of one number, a touch a game. We expect him to have a touch more a game than he had last year. And listen, if you're going to finish as a running back, mid running back 2, and we're going to project you for a touch more a game, it's got to be better than that to be a top 5 running back. You just have to have more than that. And I understand that there's risk with other guys going after him. I just can't get on board. If you're going to take someone that high, he doesn't even have that high of a floor, let alone that high of a ceiling. And I just think it's a really rough bet to make at this point, where you can take guys like Christian McCaffrey, where if you're right there, you can make a big difference. And I don't even know if you're right on Javonte Williams. We don't even project him to make that big of a difference at this point.
Yeah, I think the Melvin Gordon coming back chess piece was a huge one that we were watching. And when that ball dropped, Dynasty didn't react. I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, even if you expect him to be a bigger part of that committee, it's still a bigger committee than you want to invest. And it's basically a projection ahead as a Dynasty asset of saying, this year there'll be a Melvin Gordon injury, or Melvin Gordon go sit over there, or in 2023, it'll be his show. It's a lot of projecting ahead where guys in that range and guys later, you just do not have to take that risk of that he never truly becomes that guy. He was in a committee in North Carolina, albeit, one with a ton of touches between he and Michael Carter to have that running back infused offense. So I just think that he's a glaring one and a good one to start with there. I'm going to go to another running back, and you were saying overvalued, overinflated, and I think this is going to be underrated and one that we've pounded on quite a bit. And I really think that the older running back this year is just so juicy, some of the profiles here. And I'm going to go towards maybe one of the biggest low-hanging fruit players, Zeke Elliott. You look at the Cowboys offense and Dak Prescott maybe getting some of his mobility back. But this is one of the offenses you want a piece of the pie. I think Dalton Schultz is pretty affordable and interesting. But when you say there's 20-plus running backs going ahead in Dynasty over Ezekiel Elliott, and I looked this up because I knew in the hierarchy of active running backs, he was high. He right now, with Le'Veon Bell, probably not going to play this year. Adrian Peterson, probably not going to play this year. The number of running backs that have 5 running back 1 seasons, it's Ezekiel Elliott right here, Alvin Kamara, and Mark Ingram. That's the list. Active guys and adjusted points per game finishes. And Zeke has finished top 15 every year, top 12 every year but 1. And now we're going to put him out in the 20s, out to pasture at 27 years old, when, again, we don't have to read into the tea leaves this offseason, but they've said he's measured really well in the GPS tracker, looking healthy. He played hurt last year, much to the demise of Tony Pollard drafters and hopefully starting him a bunch. But Ezekiel Elliott was still a vibrant fantasy option last year, playing through injury and looking like he was a step slow and looking like he might be eroding in front of our eyes, but again, playing through injury. So you're talking about a guy that's going to get exclusive work and exclusive goal line work in a very pungent offense that's going to be up there in the hierarchy. And so, and a guy that's been there, done that every single year, and you're going to try to run him out of town dynasty value-wise at 27. I don't get it. And to me, there's 27-year-old guys that are going much higher, and you can say, oh, well, their market value and insulation is shot. Well, I'm going to look in a couple year window anyway, and Zeke is locked and loaded. So I think he's one of the low hanging fruit here.
Yeah, we talked about him recently, and it was the like the Frank Gore. He almost looks like Frank Gore in terms of how early people have written him off, and like you could see 3, 4, 5 more years of really high end production, and all of a sudden, he's just kind of vanquishing the next drafted guy. The one that I find, and I don't even know if I wouldn't even just consider myself right on this. I just find it fascinating. Maybe the most oddly priced player for me in all of Dynasty is Gabe Davis. And you look in the month before the NFL draft, you look where he was, wide receiver 38, right? In terms of where he was in real drafts going in Dynasty. You take the month after the NFL draft or a month out from the NFL draft. Where has he moved? Running back, wide receiver 37. So he has moved one spot up. When you look at him in
do you think he should be moving up more? I'm curious where you're going with this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you look at the situation. They didn't draft anyone, right?
Jordan. Whoa. Didn't draft anybody. They draft someone in the same round that Gabe Davis went.
All right. They did draft Shakir. What did they do? They let Beasley walk. They brought in Jamison Crowder. We'll see how that looks. They have so far let Emmanuel Sanders walk, and they didn't address the position in the first round, the first 2 days of the NFL draft. And so what do I say about that? You look at his production over the past 2 years, it was basically the same in terms of where he was at. Almost 600 yards as a rookie, 549 in his second year, both 61 targets, both 35 receptions in those 2 years. He ran a bunch less routes last year. Some of that just related to the other competition at the position, and they just didn't call on his number quite as much. You look at his end of the season production, he puts himself in a really interesting spot. And I just think I find it odd that he is a top 24 redraft player in terms of where the market is taking him in redraft. And he's less in Dynasty, which makes zero sense for a player.
This is like the Adam Harstead theory, right? Where he always talks about young players, and it's like the ones that are going later in Dynasty than redraft is a pretty stark contrast to what typically occurs.
Yeah, and I think that should be definitely a situation that you should probably close down. For us, we have him wide receiver 30 in terms of projection, so we're projecting him over his cost. We're projecting him under his market value in redraft or underdog ADP, but we're between, and I think. Listen, if from a wide receiver 38, 37 spot, you're getting top 30 production, top 24 production is projected. I'm stunned given some of the guys that are projected with the exact opposite. Guys that you're getting, Elijah Moore, for example, who are the flip flop of that, right? Who are top 24 wide receivers who are being projected outside the top 36. You have the exact opposite going on. So I think Davis, just I'm just going to arbitrage those two things. And honestly, I got him really late. I got him at wide receiver 50 in a startup this week. I mean, I don't even really love him, but I just think in terms of the profile that he represents, that's a clear arbitrage situation where you just say, all right, we'll just take this and figure out, because you know what, if the redraft market's right, his dynasty price is going to go up. Almost certainly.
It'll be something that corrects within 6 to 9 months.
Correct.
I do think it's interesting, though, sort of profiling here. You could frame it one way, which is you could say, if you ever want a wide receiver 2 on a team, you want it with a big time quarterback. That applies here. Mm-hmm. You could also say, well, it's Stephon Diggs' show. Everyone else is fighting for the Robin role. And you could say, well, Dawson Knox, he's not a nobody. They brought in O.J. Howard. We'll see how many routes he runs versus blocking if they go more to a 2 tight end attack. And like you said, some of these guys that have been on the team before, a Beasley type, a Emmanuel Sanders, someone else of the veteran ilk, do they come in? And then I always think about he's a round 4 guy. He's not really on the success track so far. They brought in Shakir. Is he going to be, is this an ambiguous situation? Or is he's the clear-cut number 2, and the number 2 can be a top 20 guy in a strong elite quarterback offense? So I kind of go both ways on it. And when you first said he's in the wide receiver 30s, I was like, for a guy that has a clear-cut strong in his prime player like Stephon Diggs ahead of him on the depth chart, that doesn't sound too great to me. But like you were saying, I mean, there's other guys that are mispriced ahead of him where you go, well, he has a better chance to finish top 24 than someone like Elijah Moore and that ilk. So I go both ways on Gabe Davis. I find it, and there's actually a quote in the Shark Pool this week, basically talking about he's a tough one to finally to get together in a buy-sell market, because it seems like the divide is so vast between largely what someone will pay and then someone that has him is like, well, you look at this big upside profile that could occur. And so that spread is wider than most players.
Yeah, and that's probably right. But I find it interesting, like, again, this isn't every draft, and I'm not saying mine is truly representative, but you get to a spot where, I mean, I'm sitting there and it's like, he's in the late 40s, into the 50s, and I'm like looking around and I was like, all right, there's a chance that he's a wide receiver too and that's what we project. We project him 63 catches. We project 107 for Diggs. We project 57 for Crowder, right? And it's a much less yardage for Crowder. And if something happens to Diggs, I mean, all of a sudden, who's thrust in a position where you could really make an outsized impact? I mean, we're looking at things that can make a huge, huge impact and really, truly move the needle. That's one that's, that's one I want to grab onto at that cost, right? I don't want to do that where the payoff on an Elijah Moore, for example, isn't that high. And the payoff on some of these other guys isn't that high, right? If you get Gabe Davis right from wide receiver 50 cost, it can move the needle. Not saying it's the highest likelihood thing, but that's the type of situation that I think you can really outkick your coverage with.
This is Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara, episode 106 of the Football Guys Dynasty Show. Want to remind you about shop.footballguys.com. You want to look like a champion there with the Football Guys official gear and merchandise. It's almost draft season. Jordan is sporting it every week here. And they've got that classic Black-Eyed Joe logo. And actually, coming up, Hall of Famer in the fantasy space, Joe Bryant. So that Black-Eyed Joe logo, want to shout out to Joe here. Congratulations. That quality design materials, you got hats, shirts, outerwear, coffee cups, everything you want. Shop.footballguys.com. So we got the fourth mispriced player in the Dynasty marketplace here. And I'm going to go, again, another this is me just hitting it right down the middle. This is hitting the drive, nowhere near the rough. And I'm going to go with A.J. Brown. I, for about 12 months now, have not understood A.J. Brown, because he's one that, I mean, it's got to move with the move to the Eagles, right? I mean, I actually think this is a more treacherous spot for him. I know we got the big payday, so that's going to get some allegiance, but I mean, quarterback step down as a passer, ? Ron Burgundy. And the fact that he's basically in the middle of the top 10 for dynasty wide receivers. And I just keep coming back to what's his career peak so far? What has he done through 3 years? I'm not going to say it's nothing. It's good, but is it top 5, 6, 7 dynasty wide receiver good? I think that's where we have to draw the line, because I look here and there's so many arbitrage opportunities. For example, you look at the last 3 years, for example, and someone like A.J. Brown versus, say, DJ Moore. They're not that different, and yet you could say DJ Moore has a lot of touchdown upside, quarterback upside remaining, where things have been pretty difficult in both of those regards. A.J. Brown has had some seasons with long touchdowns. He's had generally quality quarterback play, and you put that together and you say, well, DJ Moore is decently cheaper. And so A.J. Brown is one where he's up there. I like him as an NFL player. Fantasy-wise, dynasty-wise, I see a guy that so far has peaked at wide receiver 12 in adjusted points per game. He's got a couple other seasons in the top 30. But to anoint him and put him as a guy that I know some had him in the top 2 or 3 at moments in time during his career. And this whole, again, I'm getting crotchety, because now I get to the point, old man yelling at clouds, where I say, if you haven't got all the way home, why are we projecting it on what you're going to do next that you've never done? And it's not. So I get really antsy when someone finishes a wide receiver 30 as a rookie, and they're like, that's it. Wide receiver 3 in Dynasty. That's it. He's going to take 3 steps forward in the next 2 years. And then, or if you say his peak year through 3 or 4 years is wide receiver 12, make him top 10. Really? No, there's plenty of guys that do far better that earlier. And I think part of the reason is A.J. Brown is young enough and he's done enough. And frankly, I think folks are a little scared of the 27, 28, 29-year-old when those guys have been there, done that, and had multiple seasons better than A.J. Brown has ever done.
Can I pitch you on A.J. Brown?
Do it.
All right. So A.J. Brown,
at cost, go for it.
All right. When you look at his career points per route run, it's 0.55. That is 98th percentile. When you look at career yards per route run, it is 2.61. That is 98th percentile. When you look at the percentage of his routes that he's been targeted on, it is 24.96. So we'll call it 25% of his routes. So 1 every 4 routes. That is 95th percentile. When you look at all that, and actually when you sort out just guys that were up above for a career 200 routes, he actually ranks in the 100th percentile of guys in yards per route run. When you sort it out in terms of guys that ran 200 or more routes in their career, 98th percentile in terms of targets per route run. You are looking at, outside of Justin Jefferson and Julio Jones, the most efficient wide receiver walking an NFL field on Sundays. The problem with him thus far has been that he has not gotten the volume, and he hasn't played in a high enough volume setting. Now you can sort of look at Philly and you can say there's two stories here. There's one, they're the most pass happy team in the NFL to start last year, or the second half is like, hey, second half of the season, we run the ball a ton. Which one of those things are we going to see? I think that could really dictate it. Now you could say, I don't have a great feel for that. And I was actually looking at this today, and we aren't super bullish on their volume. I thought we had, I don't want to say this wrong, but I'm pretty sure we had Jalen Hurts ranked as the 25th most attempts. Yeah, we do. The 25th most attempts in terms of passers this year. So that's not great in terms of the A.J. Brown stat, in terms of overall ceiling. But if the volume ever gets right for him, this is a Mark Andrews situation at tight end where he can absolutely where he was at tight end. This is a Mark Andrews situation at wide receiver where he's an absolute monster. He just hasn't been given enough opportunities in the passing game yet because he played a run first offense. That's the pitch for okay. But I'll say this, that's not what people are like. That people are just bullish on him for other reasons, I think, and they think, oh, the volume's going to go up, the volume's going to go up. When you look at him, he is truly elite. I don't think people understand exactly what I just said.
The concern, I know they backed the Brinks truck up for him, but they have a first round pick who is on the success track post year 1 in Devonta Smith. They've got Dallas Goedert. So you have 3 guys that frankly could be on this higher end track for their relative positions. And then you've got the huge question mark at quarterback. And we always say, well, if this year doesn't work out, they could always go back to the quarterback marketplace. Should be an appealing landing spot for a potential veteran or trade. They've got multiple firsts. I get all that. But just, again, the projecting ahead to a guy that's never done it. And there's some injury things going on there. I mean, and I just think that's a lot of talent on one offense when you say quarterback, shoulder shrug. Let's see what we got. I mean, if you were saying this is an offense with Josh Allen or Justin Herbert or, one of the big guns, then, I mean, they can all eat. They can all finish, top 24 and then tight end top 12. They can all do that. But I have this feeling that, I mean, 2 of these 3 are going to largely lose out. And could it be A.J. Brown winning? Yes. Could it be all of them, though, kind of missing their mark in terms of cost for this year? But again, every year tolls for Dynasty. So I would really like it. I think it would be more appropriate if A.J. Brown were wide receiver 10 to 15. I just think that would be more appropriate for the whole, concoction that we got going in the old saucepan here.
Yeah, I'm with you. Let me ask you this. So we can look back last year and Philly's designed pass rates. This is the percentage of plays that were actually designed drop back passes was 53.6%. That ranked as the 27th highest. So you're looking bottom 6 or so teams in terms of how pass happy they were. And you also look at them, they were ranked 21st in plays per game at just about 60.3. that's got to go up, right? Like both of those things have to go up, right? You don't back up the Brinks truck for AJ Brown and then be a bottom 5 team when you in terms of passing rate, when you have Dallas Goedert, you have Devonta Smith, like it's got to go up, right? Like, I mean, what we saw at the beginning of last year has to be what they actually want to do.
What's funny,
right?
I keep thinking of Russell Wilson in Denver when they start.
I know.
when you start saying all this, you're like, so it's got to go up, right? We'll see. We will see, Jordan. It's like two fists bumping into each other in the night.
It's got to go up. It's got to go up.
Got it, please. It has to, right? I mean, it just makes sense. Just a little. See how it goes. Just a little.
We'll cite Sig here and say the assumption of rational coaching, right? I mean, the assumption
assumed rational coaching.
Yeah. So I mean, but I mean, here's if it's one of those things with AJ Brown, I am
just
with you
open running lanes for Jalen Hurts. That's all they want to do. Stretch the field, open it up.
Yeah, so someone's gonna eat in that offense. I'm just not sure if it's gonna be Miles Sanders or one of the receivers.
Man, if it's Miles Sanders, that is gonna flummox the dynasty community. That's probably the one answer where they go, nope, not him, not that guy. They probably be less surprised if it was Kenny Gainwell.
Right.
All right.
That'd be the bet against, right? If you wanted to bet against the assumption of rational coaching, just take Miles Sanders. Right?
Exactly. Miles Sanders, one of the cheapest starting running backs out there in Dynasty. And it'd be like, it's late. Just assume Saquon Barkley left Penn State. It's all going to be good now. Everything's fine. Yes. All right, let's talk some Dynasty trading here. And we don't talk a lot of deep leagues here. We got a 16-teamer, so we can talk about lineup depth and what it takes, what it costs of depth in that format versus getting someone that can be lineup viable for you. So we got Adam Thielen for Khalil Herbert, Josh Palmer, and 210. So that's 26 overall.
You're probably not getting anyone that's actually making your lineup in terms of Herbert's going to be an injury away type guy. Maybe we'll see. Josh Palmer, probably not going to be a guy in your lineup, and 210, that's 26 overall, especially in a 16-team league. I mean, that's even, right? You think 210 and 12-team league, you have to recondition yourself to say 26 overall at 210 here. You're probably on the outside in a one quarterback league. You're probably on the outside looking in on a day 2 running back, for example, there. So you're dropping your odds. With a guy like Thielen, I think that there's a chance 100 plus targets. We've seen him double-digit touchdowns here in multiple seasons here recently. So I think I would take Thielen there and just kind of understand that what you have with Palmer, what you have with Herbert, even though it might seem deep in terms of rosters in a 16-team league, right? Those guys are closer to the waiver, which you can replace in the waiver wire than you can like 110 target guy that has a quarterback that's pretty good throwing them the ball.
Yeah, I wish the pick was a little later, but I'm not a big Josh Palmer fan, and I like Herbert, but you can arbitrage your way much cheaper to the backup running back marketplace. So I wish that was cheaper because 26, you have a shot, and especially if you have some other pick in the earlier third round or something, you can get up into that Brian Robinson, Tyrion Davis price kind of stuff going on there, and you may even get TDP at 210. It's within the range of outcomes. So my side is on Thielen just because if you're at all competitive right here, you're getting a guy you can plug and play, and you're talking about if it's three wide receivers, 48 deep on a weekly basis, he's easily inside that. And you get 1 to 2 years of that. How many starts do you get out of Herbert? Like you said, it's a variable. It's a variable if he is going to be the backup, even though he looked decent in 2 or 3 games last year when he sort of had that refined role. Josh Palmer, though, he's on the bus track, and they just brought back Mike Williams, excuse me. I think it's really easy to overrate the chances when someone doesn't get off to a good start from that round 3 or day 2 bucket for wide receivers if they don't show it. I think teams have a greater impression of that day in, day out for the first 12 months. And they're like, let's just dip back in either via the draft or a free agent splash. And typically you recycle guys and get the good or better players. And then the Josh Palmers of the world just end up not working out. So that was one of the things of this deal is that not overrating guys like Josh Palmer and viewing them as quality depth in a deeper format. All right, we got a 12-team, one quarterback, and only half PPR, so a little bit of bump there for the running back position, and Cam Akers involved in this one. So we've got Cam Akers for 112, and then a 24 first, second, and third, so a couple years out.
Well, I hate the construct of giving picks 2 years out. That drives me up a wall in terms of that, because you even if this is the right cost for Akers, it is you're foregoing the chance to do something better later on, right? And I really don't like that in terms of these deals. So it is one quarterback, so I think that changes your opinion a little bit in terms of how you think about that. That future flexibility. I always think of those future, especially in Superflex, I always think of those future picks as, hey, this is an upgraded quarterback. If we want to make that deal down the line, depressed asset quarterback, who is it? Where can we find it? It's like a star in basketball. That's my initial reaction to this. I do think going after Akers in a different way might make some sense. I do think we've probably soured too much. We went from, he comes back and we think he's like Superman in a football uniform because he came back from, but he is, right? Because he comes back from Achilles as quick as he does. And then for that exact same purpose, we punish him because he has a really bad PFF grade. He struggles in terms of all his ancillary stats. Like, he doesn't perform that well relative to what we expected of him. And then all of a sudden he drops from being a top 5 running back because he's Superman to being in the, 15 range. And I think somewhere in between there is probably right for him. And a lot of those guys, the difference between, and what I would say maybe the last point on this, the difference between running back 5 and 20, you have all these problems, right? I would probably seek out a deal that looked different for someone else in that range, right? That would sort of be mine. Instead of giving picks and tying yourself up and hamstring all your future flexibility, you can do a deal like this for someone less or someone different in that range with a different GM. And that would be the angle that I would go.
Yeah, a couple things. One on Cam Akers is, I've said before, not playing and just being out. If he had not played the whole year, the bad optics, it usually punishes a player more playing through injury. We saw that with Zeke Elliott, Cam Akers, of playing through, and then Cam Akers obviously with his return, it's a negative. And if you just are out, ACL, okay, gone for the year, we'll see you next year, then it just really does not affect you as much. It's just time out in the corner, go sit over there. And so that was one thing. And the other thing is with Cam Akers, he's a risky profile to buy with so much insulation of future assets. It's 2 firsts, and it's fine if you want to pay 112. Like, I would actually prefer, it's 112 and 201. You kind of know what you're paying. Okay, this could be, is that Isaiah Spiller with the 201? I'm thinking of a 1 quarterback. And then, 112, is that maybe Jahan Dotson or something? Like, if you want to pay that, fine. But the going into the future and giving all these picks, because I think 112, what can you buy with that? Like, just today on a contender with 109, I didn't like the board and I bought Chris Godwin. So you can get, with 112, you have options. Like, does that get you relatively close to Ezekiel Elliott? Does that get you relatively close to Leonard Fournette? I mean, so what I don't like is when people get focused and laser beamed on a certain thing. I need running back. Oh, okay. Well, I need a young running back. Oh, okay. I need a young running back that's coming off an Achilles that is on a certain team, and I want to pay 2 firsts. Oh, okay. Like, you're getting very specific here on what you're buying. And I don't think enough people just go, well, this is kind of what I'm looking for, and here's the general price point. Let me go out there and try all those things. And if it doesn't work, I can, like, if this was 112 and a 24 second, like, I think we talk about this trade differently. If this is 112 and, like I said, 201, I think we talk about the trade differently. If it's 112 and some other running back added on because they want to upgrade, okay, we understand that. So I will say, half PPR, non-PPR helps Akers more than it does, because he could be a guy that scores 15 plus touchdowns. We shouldn't be overly surprised with the 1A role if he looks a little better and has exclusive goal line and all these things are within scope. So this format does help him a little bit, as opposed to full PPR or point per target or some diabolical pass-centric format for running backs.
You could pay less for someone that we just talked about, Zeke, right? You could do a deal for Zeke that's less than this, right?
Well, yeah, like I mean, 112 probably doesn't do it, but 112 and something less than a future first does.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That would be that'd be the pivot.
So yeah, if you're kind of up and coming with your roster, then this doesn't make sense. And then if you're a strong contender, I would argue, why don't you go after, an assassin? Why don't you go after Christian McCaffrey? Why don't you go after why don't you make a ceiling play? Is what I would say. Like, why don't you, Austin Eckler? Like, why don't you go for a big ceiling? Because I think Akers has less outs to get that ceiling, less avenues. And then we still have is he going to be better? Like, Marlon Mack is the guy that, boy, wouldn't that help if we could see him play? We didn't see him play. He's been on ice. And now we're finally seeing Deonta Foreman look a little better last year. That's 2 years removed. So for Cam Akers, that would not include 2022. That would be a 2023 arrival date, a delivery date for him looking more like what we saw before the injury. And in this trade, that makes it a pretty big failure. If you don't get, like you were saying, I mean, if you don't get a top 12, top 15 kind of producer this year, you already burned 112 that you could have spent on something else. And now you've got the clock ticking on those 24 picks. And that basically that 24 class that you gave up, man, I just don't like, I think there's so many ways to lose the deal.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I just think there's so many other opportunities that you could address the running back position. Fournette, Connor. I mean, just as you were talking, I'm just thinking about all the other pivot options that I would spend. Listen, this deal isn't going away, right? Whatever time the rookie draft is, you have to navigate that. But the person that is, if this is sitting in your inbox from the Akers person, they're going to do it. Something valued like this, they're going to take it for Akers. So that. Right. So go out and find yourself a better situation. Go shopping, right? Don't just take the first thing you see when you walk into the store.
Yeah. And that's one of the bigger points that I would make. I mean, when I am in a rookie draft and I get on the clock and I don't like the board, or I think there's value to be had because a clear target player isn't there for me, I mean, you go around the dial, turn those I mean, I know the young kids, they have no idea what we're saying, but you used to turn the dial on the TV. There were 13 channels and UHF or whatever it was, and you turned the dial. No remote or anything. But what that means is you go shopping. You go to every single roster and you go, okay, what kind of sounds right for this pick? So if that was 112, you're kind of getting close to 112. All right. I thought one guy, maybe if he falls, but he went at 109. All right. So when you get on 112, you go around the dial. You go, okay, I'm open to paying 112 or 112 plus 212 or 112 and something in the future. And you start sending offers around the league, see what happens. This is kind of like, I mean, I would imagine in the dating world, I mean, what is it? Do you swipe up, down, left, right? I don't know what way you go, but
I have no idea.
Yeah, exactly. This is the wrong room. But what I mean is you send out feelers. Maybe you text a few of your friends. Hey, what are you doing tonight? And then, because that's how you end up not sitting at home if that's not what you want to do on a Friday night. You send out feelers. Maybe you start on a Wednesday, right? You're like, hey, who's going to the football game? Anyone want to go to the movie? Oh yeah, we're playing cards at my house. Well, so now you have options. But this whole again, this guy offered me something for Akers, and then we countered back and forth, and then this is the deal. I mean, look for something else. Look for a lot of different things else. All right. We got Gabe Davis involved in this last one, 12-team Superflex. I'm really interested in your thoughts on this one, Jordan. So we got 109, 209, Gabe Davis, all for 103, moving on up in the 2022 class.
I guess I wonder what's at 103, right? Is that Drake London or is that Kenneth Walker? I think that might impact me. But if you're dealing within the subset of first round wide receivers, I take the 109 side every day of the week. Because what have we talked about rookie draft time? It's really hard to pick between those guys historically. The market doesn't do any better than random, and neither does the NFL draft order do any better than random. So when you start looking at that and you say, okay, well, I'm getting two semi equal shots, if you're willing to sort of work with that, plus you're getting a guy like Gabe Davis, who frankly is capable of replicating, if not beating, a guy like Drake London this year. And you're getting a different type of bet a little bit later on in the round that could match him in terms of that could match the pedigree. And you're probably getting a day two running back in the in the second round with that 209 pick. Like, this is how you build depth, right? This is how you actually, and people talk about, oh, I have to, I got to trade Jonathan Taylor for depth. No, like, this is how you build depth. You take, all right, well, listen, I'm going to get an upside shot at wide receiver. I'm doing it at the cost of largely a random-ish pick. And I'm going to get another shot at running back to really flesh out the back of my roster. And now I've got really 3 ways that I can win coming out of this draft versus just one. I really, really like the 109, 209, and Davis side of this trade.
What do you think 103 gets if you shop that for a veteran? I didn't do that much this year. I wasn't in that 103, 104 kind of zone a lot. And so, I delved a lot into that later first and what kind of veteran did that get? That was a lot of my exploratory deals. And so 103, like, my first thought was, is that up in the DK Metcalf, DJ Moore kind of zone where, like you were saying, if you are looking wide receiver, you could also just flip straight over there. Now, those are younger wide receivers, so the team trading them may not be as conducive to just flip over for the pick.
So here, I have some 103 trades from the past month or so. So 103 for DK Metcalf straight up, 103 for 104 and a fourth, 103 for Derrick Henry, 103 for Justin Fields, which I think is interesting. That I'm not a huge Justin Fields buyer, but that's an interesting deal. And then 103 for basically you move down, and they kind of moved around in the rounds with that one. That's not a really great one. 103 and Rondale Moore for T. Higgins. So you're getting basically a wide receiver that you probably project better.
You can get an auto start core level wide receiver and kind of take all the monkey business out. Would be one of the thoughts from 103. So if you move down to 103,
right?
Well,
that's the other one.
Right. And you can be pretty high up on the hierarchy there. And then 109, 209, Gabe Davis. I think if you move down, it sounds like a good idea because you can parse that out and you can be like, well, Chad just said he traded 109 for Godwin, or you can maybe, still pivot that to a Mike Evans and something, and then you still have 209, you still have Gabe Davis. But I think, man, 103, I kind of think you could trade down to the later first. I mean, to the 7, 8, 9, 10 range and still get someone. I mean, I think that I saw some trade that was like 103 it was 106 to like 112, and they picked up James Conner or something. So that kind of thing. Can you go 3 to 7 or 8 and pick up a James Conner type? Like, that's sort of what I'm thinking. Like, if you move down, I think you can maybe do better than 209 and Gabe Davis. What do you think?
This is the wide receiver version of that deal, right? Yeah. This is the James Conner wide, but in a wide receiver form, right? This is that deal. So yeah, I mean, what I would say is, if this is the best you can get on the deal, take it, right? But I would have, for example, I use a 103 centric deal to get. I think there was a later first involved. There's a couple other pieces, but it ended up being Stafford, right? So I do think you can shoot high, but if it's between, hey, I'm on the clock, this is the best offer that I have. It's kind of how I assumed of this deal. I would take it if you can't get better, right? If you can't shoot higher in terms of, you always want to be moving up the board, right? You always want to be using your picks to try and get, to go from a contributing player to a core player, or a core player to a star player, right? Go up to a supermax quarterback. You always want to be sort of moving up that hierarchy. I assume that this was out. I think you bring up a good point of, don't just settle for this.
Yeah, and just to finish off the deal on one thing, you mentioned it does vary a little bit. So if Kenneth Walker's there at 3, are you probably just picking and
probably
not
sticking
messing
and
around?
picking?
Yeah,
I'm probably sticking and picking with the
and he's fading just for data points for him. I've seen him fall outside the top 3 more in the past week or two than I did early May. Early May, it was a lot of Hall, Walker at 1 and 2. And now we're seeing a lot more guys mixed in, and I've even seen 5 or 6, in terms of falling for Kenneth Walker. So you got to, and that's why just one other point I would say is, if you think you're going to be on the outside looking in this year, you don't know. If you got a certain number and you're like, well, Kenneth Walker, and I'm sitting at 3 or 4 or 5, and you say, I don't think I'm going to get him, I got to make some big move up. I would say just you can explore a move up, but I would say tread a little lightly because you've got a better chance than you think of someone like that falling, or whatever that, especially with the wide receivers that are going in a myriad of orders. That sitting there at 7 or 8 and saying you can't get one of them is folly in my opinion. So
let me ask you this: who would you rather have, Kenneth Walker or James Cook, Brian Robinson, and Gabe Davis?
I'd rather have Walker. I mean, that's not
okay,
but I'm splitting it out, in my opinion, especially in a lot of the leagues where, let's face it, we don't have the how deep is this roster, but most of them are in the 20s. So I'll say that those trying to be lean and mean at wide receiver, and trying to get a running back that, like, again, I can bag on Kenneth Walker as good as anybody, but he still was a top 45 pick on a very ambiguous depth chart. And, you're getting him in a class where there's not a lot that should keep him out of the top 3. And a lot of times you get him at, say, 3. So I think at 3, you would have to just crush that over and over again.
Yeah.
All right. Want to remind you that we are on our own feed if you're watching this live stream, but in general, if you found us, thank you so much. Please subscribe. Please rate and review us. We are out on our own. We have been pushed out of the nest. We've been talking about it for 2 or 3 months. You can just search Football Guys. You'll find the feed. You can search Football Guys Dynasty. All these things work on your podcasting platform. Too easy to find us and subscribe. Also want to remind you about that free email update from Hall of Fame Joe Bryant. You can find that in the right corner of the Football Guys homepage there. So too easy. And all of your league mates are on it. Don't miss the news. Don't miss all of the updates you have to future Football Guys content. And we've got one big macro discussion here for the Football Guys Dynasty Forum quotes of the week. And this is about negotiating a trade. This is about, honestly, I want to open it up about trade comments, because that's we could honestly talk a whole show about trade comments. But this one specifically is, I hate it when I'm negotiating a trade and someone tells me what their calculator says. So the calculator part is one aspect. The other aspect is just about providing comments in general, going back and forth when you are trying to nail down a deal.
Yeah. I mean, the calculator thing, if Chad wants to try and get my heart rate up at any given moment, he can just mention trade calculators to me, and he knows it's going to do the trick. So let's just pivot for a second. They're giving you information for free, which is telling you what their trade calculator is telling them. So a couple of things, right? Assuming that they tell you which one it is, what
always ask.
Following. Right?
Ask which one it is.
Can I get a link to this? I want to see this, right? Play stupid. But find out what it is.
Never heard of it.
Now, there's such thing as calculators. I don't know what these things are.
TI-82.
You want to know what they are, and then you can say, all right, like, then from if it depends on who it is, right? If they have a bias, what that calculator leans towards, or what the site leans towards that offers the calculator, and then you can construct a deal towards them that actually makes them inclined to say yes, right? And that is, in this day and age, right? You can be me, and you can be crotchety, and you can say calculators are stupid, or you can lean into it and say, listen, the calculators they're what they actually are exploitable. And I think leaning into that, especially when someone gives you the information, that is a very helpful and exploitable thing. And I don't even need to necessarily make a point that you're doing it, but just kind of send them back an offer, and then right? Then and then you put them to the test too. You will find out how strongly they believe in that calculator.
Yeah, I think any information is good information. You may not want to hear it, but it's kind of like asking a question and you say, at least they answered. Mm-hmm. Because when they decline something, that's the first thing. Like if I see, I sent out 20 offers and the answers are starting to come back and it's a whole thread of emails that are rejected, I scroll through really quickly and I'm just looking for comments. Mm-hmm. Which ones said comments? Because then if they say something like, hey, I'm looking for this position, or I don't value this guy so highly, or you can get a lot of information on, or especially what I like is the ones that say, this one's pretty close or whatever, or I'll look for a counter. I mean, you can get right back in there and just resculpt the deal, especially if it looks like they might be interested in one part of the deal but not the other. So all this is good information. The straight decline gives you nothing, and you're still just out there guessing. You're guessing on what they're looking for, and whether it's a certain site or a certain calculator, that any information they provide you is valuable intel. And I found that it's pretty darn easy to pare it down. It's almost like Battleship, right? You're guessing numbers and letters, but once you get a hit, you can refine that into a tighter window of your shot cluster on getting it. So I find that I have a really good success rate once I start getting comments and once that dialogue is started with another GM.
I have a question, and I feel, let me just ask you this without giving any sort of, but do you give a ton of trade? Do you give trade comments?
I usually provide comments, but I'm usually cryptic because, again, I'm playing this game from the opposite standpoint. So
you don't want to give free information, right?
Yeah. So what I usually say is I'll say something very vague, like, I value, like, whatever. If they're trying to acquire a certain player, I'll say I value, player X higher than this deal. That's obvious because I declined it. So I'm not really saying anything. Mm-hmm. I'm just basically saying, I acknowledge you. I acknowledge what happened here. And I'm just telling you something, or, it would take a lot more than this, or I would need a higher end, main piece. Like, I mean, so that is information, like, oh, well, you just have to up your, the main thing that you're putting over here, if that's a pick or a player. So I'm usually very, very cryptic, but I do give comments, I would say, more than the average. I will say this. Okay, passive aggressive Chad, here's what he does. So when I get an offer that is just like not even in the same universe, I will, when during a day, like if I get some of those, I literally just delete the email. I don't even go to the site. I'll go decline it at my leisure, I guess. But I'm not going to say this is great, but it is a habit of like, hey, I got stuff to do, and me spending an extra 20 seconds to go in there and write a comment of saying it's not close or decline it. I mean, I don't know. It feels like they were fishing, and I'm just going to be like, I know they can't predict my player value subset or whatever, but that's one. I would say that's probably my biggest bad habit in Dynasty is I just kind of smirk and then I just delete it. And then I know some of those end up expiring or they revoke them 3 days later or whatever. Frankly, they should let them expire because why would you revoke them? There's such a great deal for them. So right. Anyway, but that is one thing that I probably should correct because I do say, you should be active and you should be a part of your league. And that is an offer that someone reached out to you. And you frankly, if you go a week without receiving any offers, that probably wouldn't be any fun in your leagues either.
Yeah. I tend to I tend to just not respond.
What's your move? So you won't write anything. You'll just reject it. Okay.
Yes. Right. And so, unless it's something I think can actually get, unless it's something I think there's actually like some substance to, right? Or saying, hey, like I think, let me send you a counter or kind of here's how I view this. But I think a lot of times, and maybe I'm cynical, but I think a lot of times that the offers that I'm receiving, especially if you can tell it's a certain player at a certain price point, that you're one of 11, right? You're one of 11 people that received the same offer where someone was trying to sell player X for a second. And I'm just not, I'm either going to counter and say I'll take a third, or I'm just not interested. And it's not really a ton of discussion point material there. Whereas if it's a 2 for 3 or a 3 for 3 or multiple moving spots, I might see that'll be someplace where I'll actually maybe engage and say, hey, listen, I don't value, players A, B, and C in this deal, but I sort of see what you're going for, and I think we could probably try and make something work surrounding this, right?
Yeah,
try and go back that way.
We've said that before. Can I take something from the deal? Like you said, a 3 for 3, you can sub out the main piece of your trade for a player that you value less. You could. I've always said, leave something in there. Leave something that they put in there. The framework of, I'll leave my side the same, but you got to change your side. Or you can leave your side the same, but I'm going to downgrade what I'm providing over here. So the angle of, are you buying this or are you selling this? Like what's what's the motivation here can be really one that is instructive for you to good practice is what I would say, getting good reps of constructing counter offers, which I think a lot of people generally struggle with. I guess the last question I would have for you is do you have a bad habit? Do you have a bad habit of this dynasty trading of like, oh, I don't look for counter offers enough, or every once in a while you get me on the wrong day and I put something snarky in there? I mean, or are you pretty much play it close to the vest?
I play it close to the vest. I will say this, and people have said that they don't like this. I do this all the time. I try and do this all the time, and it's something I learned waiting tables. I use it in my my professional. I would call it my day job, but it's not truly my day job. But when I'll just go to someone, and we use this I'll just use this as an example. In my day job, I'm a prosecutor. And so someone will come to me and they'll say, they'll have a client, they'll say, hey, I want to work something out for this guy. I want to get this guy a break. And I'll just ask him, and I do this all the time in Dynasty, especially when someone comes to me with an offer that I don't understand. What are you looking for? What are you trying to accomplish?
Does that work?
And it surprisingly does. It works in the day job, but you'll say, hey, you get a 3-for-3 deal, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, I'm missing. I don't understand what this person's thinking. Help. Hey, listen, I got your offer. Help me out. What are you trying to accomplish? Let's start with that. What are you trying to accomplish? And we'll see. Because there's 3 people that you're sending. Are you trying to sell those players? Or are you trying to buy one of my players? Right? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? And let's see if we can go from there, because then maybe we can make a match. And I've actually found success with that. It's not something I do all the time, right? If it's not every 3-for-3 that I do, but again, I want them giving me information because then I can cater to them. Right.
Well, and I think what you're alluding to is if you want information, you got to ask questions, right?
Right. And you can't, right. It's the same, I can't, if I'm waiting tables, I can't pick what you want. You need to tell me what you want. And then I can say, all right, like are you looking for fish? Right. Do you not eat meat? Right. Do you not eat pasta? Right. What is it that you're looking for? And then we can try and figure out a match for you. And whereas if you're just sort of playing blind to what they're doing and you can't figure it out. And I think that happens too. Like, I wouldn't do that with every person, right? If I don't have if I've had an antagonist, we've all played with people. You and I in particular have played with people that are no fun to play with. So I won't do this to everyone. But if it's someone I think I can actually have some sort of dialogue with, I'll sort of engage them that way. I find just from the way people talk, just subscribers and listeners, and when I hear from people, I find that they do a lot more talking in trades than I do, which I find interesting. I feel like I fail at it. So it's something I have to get better with. I see everyone coming back and forth with all these negotiations, and I was just like, I don't spend much of my time doing that.
They spend like an afternoon going back and forth on their league chat.
Right. And I just don't know if it's a format thing or a type of league or what it is, but I just don't spend a lot of my time doing that. I don't know.
Yep. All right. In this jam-packed show, we talked about our mispriced players in the Dynasty marketplace. Frankly, 4 could have been 40. We can bat that back and forth all day long, like a classic ping pong match. We also talked about deeper leagues. What does it take for your lineup? What does quality depth look like? What is that threshold? We talked a lot of pivots regarding a Cam Akers trade, future draft capital, as always. Also talked a little bit about non-PPR or adjusted PPR formats. And then finally, talking about that rookie draft ordering, Gabriel Davis had a focal point in that, as well as moving around the draft board and a lot of different ideas between the earlier and the later first round. I am Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. And until next time, good luck in your Dynasty leagues.
Congrats, Joe.